Welcome to the SBI podcast. You are joining the most watched and listened to show dedicated to B2B revenue growth. My name is Melissa Valdez, the Director of Client Engagement for SBI. Our guest today is Jack Molloy, Executive Vice President of Worldwide Sales for Motorola Solutions. Jack has transformed the sales force and generated tremendous growth in shareholder value. Jack is here to share how he made it happen. Hope you enjoy the show. From SBI's Executive Briefing Center in Dallas, Texas, the most watched and listened to content in B2B sales and marketing, it's the SBI Podcast with your host, Matt Shares.
Welcome to the SBI Podcast, a weekly show dedicated to helping you make your number. Today we're going to demonstrate how a worldwide commercial leader, sales, marketing, services, how they transform a sales force of a publicly traded company. So, big topic with lots to learn. My name is Matt Shares. I'm the CEO of SBI. I'm also your host. Joining me in the studio, as always, is my beloved co-host, Melissa Valdez. And Melissa's here to point you to resources to advance you along the way to making your number. Good to see you, Melissa.
Thank you. Always happy to be here, Matt.
So joining me today, got a little bit of public company royalty in the studio in Dallas. So I'm fortunate to call Jack Molloy, who's the EVP of Worldwide Sales, Services, Solutions, and anything revenue-oriented at Motorola Solutions. Fortunate that Jack's a friend of mine. He was kind enough to stop by in person in Dallas. So Jack, first off, welcome to the show. Great to see you as always.
Likewise, man.
Maybe just to orient the audience and the viewers, people think about Motorola in probably a certain way because it's one of those brands. Talk a little bit about Motorola Solutions today and talk a little bit about your role and what you serve. You got over 5,000 people in your org, so let's normalize with that before you and I jump into the show.
So, Matt, thank you again. Thanks for having me here today. Delighted to be here. But I think the first thing to think of, people, when they think of Motorola, I still get the question, well, do you make cell phones? And we don't. So I'll lay that out first of all. But Motorola Solutions, as it sits today, really an iconic technology brand, American technology brand, over 90 years old, the company is now. And think of it as really providing mission-critical solutions. And solutions becomes an overused word, but it's really everything from the network to devices that you see police, fire, utility workers, workers at a FedEx facility that they communicate, but also the services and the software, particularly in command center software, we're really dialed into now. And it's really providing that full turnkey solution and experience. And with that, to your point about people, really, I think when people buy from Motorola Solutions, they really buy more from the type of people. It's a purpose. Our purpose at the company is we help people be their best in the moments that matter. And I think we all believe in that. And I think that's a big reason why you've seen the company's success here in the last several years. In terms of my role, and I've been with Motorola, I think a little bit over 23 years. And as I joke with our chairman and CEO, Greg Brown, it doesn't feel like a day over 50 years. But no, it's been a fun run. And today, I'm the Executive VP of, as you said, Worldwide Sales and Services. And really, I kind of think of it as what the solutions that we bring to market, we take them to market. We got to make sure the customer experience is right, but ultimately we got to think about that from the selling motion, how we get to that customer, but ultimately their overall experience. Because when you don't have a 90-year brand unless you make people feel the right way. And I think people ultimately have a loyalty to us, not so much, a lot about the technology, but more, I think, about that experience. So that's what we've really tried to transform as well here over the last several years, Matt.
Well, you guys have had an incredible couple of years. You and I are going to talk about that. So, Melissa, the audience might want to follow along the storyline that Jack and I are going to walk through. So can you guide them on how they might do that?
Yes, I can do that, Matt. For those of you listening and watching, hopefully you have your 2018 How to Make Your Number workbook handy. If you don't, I highly recommend you go get that right now at sbi.tips/2018 workbook. We will be following along in the sales strategy section on page 342.
All right, so we're going to jump into the questions. So in the first segment, Jack and I are going to talk about, in his role, publicly traded company, all the demands of being in a public company. And then assessing a situation as a guy who grew up there, has had many, many roles. You get the nod, you step into the big job, you recognize there were things that you needed to do. how did you normalize and, I guess, set expectations between people, performance conditions, interlocks with other functions? Just kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, man. So I think the first thing, like anybody else and anybody who's watching today, and you've been in these situations, you get asked to do something. Typically, you don't get challenged with something when things are going perfectly. And so you always start there. But I think the first thing I've always done when I've taken on a new leadership opportunity is people are, to me, the most critical asset, particularly when you think about leaders. And so the first thing I had to do is to understand the challenges that we had around the globe. And we do business in over 100 countries globally. So it's a pretty dynamic business and different challenges and opportunities as they lay around the world. But the first thing I did is really to look at the team and ultimately lay out a plan for myself. I'm a big believer on setting timelines, and I'm very exacting in those timelines. And so within 45 days, I laid out who was ultimately going to be on this journey with me, and ultimately 2/3 of the team, my leadership team, the executive leadership team underneath me was new, formulated within the first quarter, either new or in expanded roles.
So before you jump to number 2, knowing 90-year brands, knowing the comfort and the prestige of being on your staff, did that create shockwaves relative to changes, whether it was new roles you created, whether it was letting somebody who you knew and probably liked and vice versa, that things were going to change? I mean, how did that reverberate through the organization?
It's an interesting question, Matt. And I think there's probably 2 things. I think that people fundamentally probably weren't surprised because, as you mentioned, and like we all have, you somewhat have a brand within a brand, and mine is one that's decisive. And the second thing is mine's one that's not about anecdotes and really not about emotions. And I don't mean that to sound cold, but I was going to let the data and really the dialogue I had with the teams and the direction that I had with the teams lead me to the fundamental answers I was looking for. And I didn't really go in with any preconceived notions of who would be in the boxes or who would not. So I really think it was 2 things: hold true to my values, and then ultimately don't make decisions based on emotion and anecdote, make them based on data.
On facts. Okay, so that's a perfect segue into my next question. So normalize the team, now you're thinking about initiatives. And there were a lot of things that you could pick, and you had to pick a few. How did you prioritize which initiatives to go after initially? Now, as I think about, when people listen to this show and watch this show, it's going to be 3 weeks, 4 weeks into 2018. How are you thinking about that and sort of dimension those 2 so people can kind of understand the journey you guys went on?
So I think the first thing was to, like anything else, when we talk about, people, process, or, program, so to speak, and then the tools. I mean, the first thing I want to make sure is that, number one, my title was worldwide sales at the time. And I think it was important for me to realize and make sure that the team realized that I wasn't going to build up a big operations center around me, because I fundamentally believed that for us to get the right path forward and to fundamentally get the growth, it was to get into the regions and to essentially move more selling resources and eliminate more central office operating expenses. I also said from an operating cadence, Matt, we're not going to come into Schaumburg at the time. We're downtown Chicago in the West Loop now, great new vibrant headquarters. I also said it doesn't make sense for us to get in the room, because I had the benefit of actually running North America, which is kind of the anchor tenant business, if you will. And I remember thinking, this is really interesting, and there were some things I really learned from doing that when we got around. But I said, I ultimately feel like with the level, the competition, the intensity of competition, and with how fast the market was moving, the more I could free up my team, my leaders, the 4 regional leaders, the head of marketing at the time, and really the financial and the marketing teams, the more I could free them up to get out and focus on what mattered, which isn't coming in and BSing me, but to get out in front of customers to make things happen, we'd fundamentally be better. So what we did is we said, hey, the operating cadence is this. We're going to come in. I'll actually travel to you, and we'll do that twice a year. We're not going to do it 4 times a year, but I'm going to have metrics, and I'll have a health check ongoing that we'll have every other. We won't have staff calls every week. We're going to do them every other week, because at some point in time, there's a law of diminishing returns in terms of the information you're getting.
Yep.
They're running up information that I should frankly know if I read a weekly. And so what we did that is we went to what I would call a very ops review light format, and one that where they knew they were going to be put in a situation where they weren't going to be able to come in and put together a PowerPoint slide deck. Matt, you know, and you've helped us with a lot of this. We were going to pre-populate a set of metrics that we were going to go, and we were going to have a conversation around numbers, around deals, and around people. And we were going to do the same thing in all. The only thing I mandated was that we're going to talk about the same set of numbers in all 4 theaters. And so we did that. We, with the help of a really effective and a great sales ops leader who you knew, Kristen, and Jason Winkler, who's just been tremendous in terms of a financial operating partner. We set up this metrics, and we said, don't come in and read slides. In fact, I'm probably going to have more questions than you're going to be able to present me. I'm going to do my homework, and I think in a lot of ways, Matt, that's an example of us, and you and I have talked about it. We got to lead by example.
Yeah.
Come in prepared. Come in to have a knockdown, drag them out for 4 hours, as people are accustomed to now. But that was it. It was really resetting the bar. Customers, teams first, me secondary, but we'll come in and be prepared when I come in.
I love that.
So
Jack, and knowing you as I know you, you're direct and you're, unapologetically authentic, right? Which is maybe why we get along well, because you're not often misunderstood. Sometimes people don't like it, but they know where one stands. So a couple things I would take from that, if I was listening to Jack, and many of the folks that listen and watch this show want Jack's job. They want the big job with that number of people and the pay and everything that comes along with what Jack has. And I would tell you, there's 3 things that I would take from that answer. The level of humility that you have is unlike many that I see. And you did it by just that demonstration. You don't even realize it. You said, hey, I'll come to you. You're not sitting back saying, come to me, because I know the way you travel, and you don't have to travel the way you travel. Yeah. You go to people. The second thing you do is you're wickedly decisive, right? So maybe all the decisions aren't perfect, just like me, but you make them and people have clarity. The third thing is relative to the consistency of the data. So what it allows you to do, I'm sure, I haven't been in one of your ops reviews, is when you sit down for 4 hours, because it's pre-populated, because there's 10 metrics or 12 or 18 or whatever it is, everybody's got the same kind of lens through which they view the business, whether it's LTV, whether it's pipeline per head, whether it's coverage. So instead of someone explaining, oh, here's my 12 slides, boss. Oh, here's my 8 slides now that you're in EMEA. There's consistency, there's comparison, which allows for benchmarking. So as I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about the employee experience that your team is having, because you started with that, it's probably one of clarity and I know where we're headed.
What's important,
Yeah.
I think, is I've realized it, and anybody who's ever really traveled around the world, even internally, we market things a certain way, and we market things to our employees that will essentially lead people to believe, well, this is really what we're doing and where we're moving as a company or as a business. Yeah. And when you got 13, 14,000 employees in over 100 countries, it's important to make sure you let people know actually what's important, how you're going to make money. Yep. And I think that's really more of a bottom line thing, Matt.
And then for context, the stock price in the last 18 months has gone up 35, 40%. I mean, you are having an unbelievable run, and you should take a lot of credit for that because commercial growth has been a big piece of it. How did you pick the data, you picked the metrics, how did you pick a couple of initiatives that you said, of all the things I can do with the direct team, we'll talk channel in a sec, but with the direct team, of all the things I could do, how did you determine which ones were going to have the biggest impact to drive enterprise value?
So there's really 2 I think of, Matt, and it was really, I talked about our flagship business. Yep. First of all, I looked at North America, and I had that job, and I realized the scope of what I was asked to do. North America is 65% of the company's revenue, and probably more so in margin. And I looked at it, and we had also, if you recall, Matt, we had also just we acquired Symbol Technologies, and I think it was around 2007, and we were also going through the divestiture of that asset to Zebra.
Yep.
And during that process, Matt, what we did is we got a little bit, we enabled our relationship, because people think of us a lot as public safety, But we've got a really good portfolio to bear to bring to the commercial and the enterprise space,
Yep.
particularly heavy industry, utilities, oil, gas, manufacturing, and T&L.
Yep.
And so what I said is, hey, over the last 6 or 7 years, we expected the account team, the symbol account team, to pick it up. But I tell people, we were trying to teach cats to bark or dogs to meow. It wasn't the same thing, and it's certainly, I led part of that team for a while. They were really good people, but you just gave them too wide of a portfolio, and it was a different, value solution you were ultimately selling. The second thing, and this is something that frankly you guys helped us a great deal on, when we went through the process of saying, I think, how do we become a more efficient sales organization? Coverage just doesn't always mean people. And then how do we develop talent? And we stood up an inside sales organization. Again, I think we lost our way there, Matt. We had gone from having a really big inside sales force in the late 90s that really fed a lot of great people. In my organization, some of the really kind of 40-ish kind of leaders all came from that area. So we said, got to develop people, but also, as you guys point out, it's a very underutilized selling motion that we can cover rural America, suburban America with. We made an investment leader, which was number one. As you guys, as we had that conversation, got a leader from the outside, and have really dialed up that presence. We also had the benefit of having this downtown Chicago location with 5 great universities there, and really kind of a pretty good central business hub. So it was that. It was putting a direct, high-touch account team on the commercial and enterprise space that's yielded, without a doubt, significant growth, and then put this inside selling team together. And Matt, both frankly, 2 years in, both have really paid dividends for us.
I think one of the interesting things, Jack, I talked about your humility, and I see a lot of sales leaders, as you know, the scope of the roles in the organizations we work with. Somebody of your background gets hired and they get the big job. As you said, 7 or 8 out of 10 times, it's not because things were going great. 2 out of 10, somebody got promoted, and it's all good for everybody. But there's a little bit of the, I'm here now, I'm the guy, I've got the answers. Something that I think you did really, really well is you said to me personally, hey, I know Motorola, I know it inside out and backwards. Please come and tell me things that I would never think of from industries I know nothing about that might be relevant for what I want to do to driving earnings per share and productivity per head up. And people that are listening and watching right now are saying, oh yeah, no shit. But it isn't actually a no shit, because what a lot of new folks do is they go, I got this. I've seen it. I'm in charge. We're going to do what I know to do from the 20 years that got me to this job. So there's this balance that one has to have, and we're going to talk about that after the break. But I think my impression of one of the reasons why is that you did that, then you surrounded yourself with a team, and we're been long left the building, that keeps disrupting you, and you put yourself in a position to get disrupted, and that's not always something that I see. So where does that come from?
I think, like a lot of, as you kind of reference, I think a lot of older companies, it's really easy to kind of say, this is our way. This is the Motorola way. This is the way we're going to do it. And the reality is, there's other markets and other that move, frankly, other industries that move faster, some that move slower. Yeah. And when you and I sat down, and I think this is what you want to look at, you want to say, first of all, outside in perspective has always been critical for me. I don't want to measure myself against the people that I frankly have worked with, had enjoyed working with, and I know what their strengths and weaknesses are. Yeah. I think outside in thinking is huge. So not only did we engage SBI, but I went out and personally, through some board memberships who hooked me up. Last year I went out and met with my peer, I guess, call him that, but at EMC, Bill Scannell. Went out and met with Matt Thompson, who is doing great things. Both those guys, to me, are really as good as it gets. Yeah. At Matt out at Adobe. And we also, from a channel perspective, because they were going through a similar thing, we also met with the folks at John Deere. Very different industries. Yeah. Software, move fast, high competition, get ready, people are trying to eat your lunch every day, to someone who actually has a real tangible value in their channel, and you got to protect and you got to understand that as well. And so every one of those things, I had some pretty fundamental takeaways. In fact, I like to read as well and just constantly be challenged, but it's not, and I always tell our people, it's not good enough just to stand pat, because if you stand pat, guess what? We won't see 100 years as a company. And so it's really just trying to make sure that our people are kind of on that perpetual mission to learn. And by the way, I bring folks on my team along to these little sessions, 6-hour, 4-hour sessions, whatever people are generous enough to spend with us. But man, I think it's that. It's and I think Greg has been very good about too. Outside in thinking, outside in thinking, outside in thinking.
Well, and for those listening, Greg is the CEO and chairman of Motorola, and I think he's also empowered you, right, to make decisions. So the level of trust between you and he and an organization of your size and scale is critical. So one thing I want to touch on before we take our break, you mentioned about the partner channel and your example with an Adobe benchmarking trip versus a John Deere benchmarking trip, and somebody's listening going, oh my God, Jack went, but that's another way that you were so humble to say, I want what's best. I don't care where I get it from. How did that translate itself into the partner channel, and how you thought about the partner channel?
So I think two things. First of all, I think particularly when I think about Adobe, it really has refined the way I've thought about our digital footprint. And so that has ramifications, and I think some of our partners would say, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that there's not a space for me? And it doesn't. It means I've got to find a way to better engage, ease what they do, and also ease fundamentally rebuild and make us easier to do business with as a company. But I'll give you an example. The European channel, Matt, it was talk about a burning platform we came in. We've got a great channel leader, Viv Francis, who's done great things, but talk about empowerment, fully empowered her to make changes. Anybody, we could have a distributor who would call us somewhere from Europe. The answer is she's empowered to do a job. In short time, she turned 40% of the team over, completely redid. We were giving our distributors better discounts than we were giving our tier one resellers who are tasked with going out and selling to the end user. Completely corrupted program. And that's all fine and well. You do all those things. You change people, great. That sounds great, Jack. You change the channel program. We're actually we stabilize a market share position. We're going to have our highest volume year that we've ever had in Europe. So it goes to show you, Matt, that when you entrust, when you empower people, and you really go through things with a logical approach on how you want to do them, and really understand what the problems are, but connect steps to outcomes. Good things happen. And so that's a perfect example from a channel perspective.
Fantastic. All right. That was a fantastic first segment. So Jack and I are going to take a quick break. We don't have water in these cups. There's alcohol in them. I'm kidding. But we are going to take a quick break, and Melissa's going to share a tool that you all can leverage.
Well, Matt, and you mentioned Jack's incredible ability to make good decisions, so I guess that's one of them, is having alcohol in the cup. And Jack, I might need your help with some decisions of my own later. But those of you out there listening and watching, you probably have some decisions to make on how you're going to make your number this year. Well, SBI has a tool specifically designed for you. It will allow you to evaluate your go-to-market strategy against the emerging best practices of market industry leaders. To get this fantastic tool, you will go to sbi.tips/revenue growth diagnostic.
You're listening to the SBI Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Shares, and today's guest is Jack Molloy. Jack's the Executive Vice President of Worldwide Sales and Services for Motorola Solutions. So today, Jack and I are demonstrating the transformation of a commercial organization, because it's much more than a sales force. It truly is the commercial, client-facing organization and a publicly traded company. We're going to jump back into the questions, and in this segment, we're going to talk a little bit about execution and adoption of initiatives. So, Jack, how did you decide what things you said, I'm going to do it internally, I'm going to get my team, I'm going to get some outside help from folks, because you're one of the most sought after people, because every management consultant from the big firms to firms like myself and our firm wants to tell you that they've got the solution for your thirst, and we're all selling the best water available. How did you make the decision, in-source, outsource?
So I think about, I go to a barber on the south side of Chicago. I know you'd think this is a very expensive haircut, but it's like $17. So there's a sign in there that says, speed, cost, quality, you pick two. And I think I use that example because essentially we can only do so much. One of the things I failed to mention is all the while through this transformation, we cut 100 million. One of the key things isn't just to grow revenue. Obviously, we got to continue to create better operating leverage. We cut $100 million out of selling and marketing operating expense of the firm. So in doing that, I wasn't going to cut salespeople because they keep the lights on. Matt, what we did is we really cut a lot of back office. And what I found through this process is, number one, if I go to somebody like an SBI, well, you're not just talking to one person. You're not just talking to people within SBI.
Right.
Every day, all around this country, you guys are out in the pursuit to gain new contracts. And by the way, they've all had problems that are probably somewhat similar to mine. If not, things we can learn off. So down the line of speed, and ultimately quality of what we do, again, going back to that kind of outside-in thinking, to me, when you're going through a problematic period, it really makes sense to have someone who gives you objective, third-party perspective, and one that's founded, I think, on what's happening within industry and maybe not things that are 5 years old. It's not a textbook, Matt. You're dealing with it every day. So that was really, when I have a problem like that, is really when I look to engage help from a third-party consultant.
So you talk about speed, I love that, speed, cost, quality. So maybe I need to meet your barber. So, because I cut my own hair and you spend $17. So between the two of us, we're $8.50.
We're not Mario Tricocci, guys.
any barber watching this has cut us off of their ideal client profile and said, I'm staying away from those two jabberjaws. So you've got speed, you've got your initiatives, and now comes the thing with the A, which I call adoption. And getting people to change behavior, human beings, it's hard. So how do you drive adoption of I don't want to say transformation, of an evolution?
It's, I think, two things. One of the things that people fail to, when they're going through a change transformation, number one, you've got to make sure that people are bought into what you're going to do throughout the process. So you recall, even during the Channel 2020, as well as what we were trying to do with our core go-to-market kind of selling motion, market coverage exercise, it wasn't happenstance. I wasn't just trying to outsource the work to my team, but I was. But because I wanted them to very much feel like they own this. You can't own it. We have to own it. And actually, when they own the implementation, the big A word, accountability. We talk about adoption, but it's accountability. Bring in the team, and it's the old adage, to whom much is given, much is expected. You let them know that you're going to expect it. But the key thing is just to set up we talked about that ops review like cadence, to dovetail it in. I want just a slide update on what you're doing and what not only what you're doing, what are the actions you've taken, but what are the results? Because when you're asking those questions about outcomes, it kind of forces the issue. It does another thing. It also, not everything, as you said, is perfect. It'll also recanvas, hey, maybe we thought we were going to do this, we're going to do this a little differently, and helped us course correct. So it's a matter of, if we're going to spend money on something that is important, I got to make sure I'm asking the questions, and I've got to make sure the leaders are bought into this thing throughout the process, Matt. That was really, I think, key for us.
Well, and I remember a conversation with you. We were talking a lot about operating leverage and capital efficiency, right? And the amount of time that my firm spends in working with private equity firms, and the power of leverage and what that means. And that was something around acquisition cost and lifetime value by product line, by market segment, and by sales channel you were focused on. For those listening, one of the things that I think Jack does better than most I've seen is he pays attention to the operating leverage in the commercial model. Simply put, how much do I spend to get a customer? How long does that customer stay with me? CAC and LTV as your two gauges, and you jumped on that. You drove that, and you didn't just look at it broadly. You looked at it and said, by product line, by market segment, and by sales channel. So you could say, God, I've got an operating opportunity with inside sales I'm not taking advantage of. I could create a frictionless experience with some of my customers who actually don't want to buy belly to belly. They would prefer to engage that way, and I'm going to get 3 or 4 turns on a piece of headcount, as opposed to having you drive from the south side of Chicago to the north side of Chicago. So I asked that because the metrics you put in place to track indicators of success from your purview with 5,000 people, if there were 3 to 6 metrics that you use to drive the car? What are those?
Yeah, so the easy ones, and when we think about financial ones, obviously you want to, what we talk about and what a couple of members of our executive team talk about in earnings call, it's obviously we talk about revenue, we talk about our OpEx, we talk about our margins and EPS. Those are, obviously really key financial metrics, but to your point, Matt, it's what feeds them.
Yep.
So we look a lot, obviously orders, and that's a very general thing, but order creation, but it's order creation plus 6-quarter pipeline. I think it gives you a very good look, not only in terms of where you are, but ultimately where you're going and what the health should be, which helps you make better decisions on that left-hand side. OpEx, am I even invested in the right spot? The other thing, Matt, I look at, just given the worldwide scope, is you have to marry those things, and obviously big proponents of use on Salesforce.
Yep.
And it wasn't always the case because we're really historically a big deal company, as you know.
Yeah.
And so, you don't get a lot out of getting into Salesforce every day when you're working on a $75 million deal in Washington, D.C. But when you look at those things and you look at backlog, pipeline, orders commit, and then you actually marry those up against, and this is key, it's GDP by country. We've got county-wide data where we look at, even in the U.S., we've got better data where we look at a county of 150,000 people should be exacting this. And we've had order history of this over the last 36 months, and the pipeline will look like this. So we get down to that level of granularity, which helps us make better coverage decisions. I love it when we walk our team through these metrics, Matt, and then I see them making good decisions. Hey, I'm actually going to take 2 people out of Spain. We lost a deal there. We're not in a good spot for 10 years.
Beautiful.
We're going to have one big game hunter to try to redo things within the, at the presidential level. Or, hey, we've kind of drained the swamp in the state of Michigan. I'm going to move 2 resources there into Iowa where I'm not doing well. Yeah. It's things like that, and I think, Matt, it's really moving to a much more analytical rigor in terms of how we run the sales force than we did before. And there's nothing I'm more proud of in the team is when they actually take that, sit and actually think and not listen to anecdotes and put good decisions in place. But to me, those are some of the key metrics.
So Jack and I are going to take another break. Let me hammer a point home that he made, and it's relative to analytics and data-driven decision-making. If you think about what Jack described, he talked about descriptive and diagnostic analytics, right? What happened and why it happened. The connective tissue is he's now using that, and his team is using that for predictive and prescriptive analytics to not only say this is what's going to happen, but how do I change the future? The example he gave of Spain, hypothetical, albeit, the purposeful reallocation of people, money, and time. So I think, Jack, that's, as I think about best practices in 2018, watching your peers that lead the commercial function be purposeful with allocation decisions. Have a way to measure both, and you talked about order plus 6-quarter pipeline, because that's for your business. For somebody else, it might be order plus 3, but whatever it is, it's a now and it's a future, but there's a regularity, and the crispness with which you said that tells me that it's embedded in the organization. Yeah. So, my compliments, and for those listening, if I was you, I would steal shamelessly from Jack, because that's a good one to implement. So, Melissa, on that, I think we have a quick break to take and something to share with the team.
You guys already need a refill? That was so fast. Yes. I mean, my goodness.
We're thirsty. That's what we do.
For those of you listening and watching, you've probably been inspired by this story by Jack and are wondering how you can transform your sales organization. Well, you don't have to go at it alone. We have SBI's subject matter experts here to help. I encourage you to look into having an interactive workshop with one of our experts, and we would be thrilled to host you here at the studio in Dallas, Texas. We can also do that at your place, but this studio is pretty fantastic, and I think you all would be happy if you came down here to check it out. So to get a feel for what's covered in these workshops, you will go to sbi.tips/2018 workbook.
All right, we're here with Jack Molloy. Jack's the Executive Vice President of Worldwide Sales and Services for Motorola Solutions, being in charge of over 5,000 people leading the commercial organization. Jack and I are in our last segment talking about the transformation and evolution of a publicly traded organization and creating significant shareholder value. And Jack has been able to do that, so it's fantastic. So, Jack, if I think about your body of work, and I'm using chapters of a book. You have strung together some great chapters, but the book is not complete. So as you kind of think about situation, opportunity, and resolution as you're looking forward into 18 and 19, now that you've sort of put this cycle, these successful cycles behind you, how do you size up current state situation, current state opportunity, and kind of current state, this is what Jack Molloy, am working on?
Yeah, Matt. So I think you should always look at, I think I always try to take a look back, and particularly this, late in the year, you kind of take stock of, okay, where were we, where do we go? And I think about when Greg came up to me and literally at his holiday party almost 2 years ago to the date and said, hey, by the way, you're going to lead worldwide sales. And one of the things he talked about was we need to rebuild credibility. And we had a couple years in a row where kind of for a lot of different reasons, the economic, FX headwinds, different kind of things that we faced, we had to call down the year and re-guide the year. And that's, as we all know, that's very problematic in a public, for a public company.
Yep.
So I think from that point, we've made 14 quarters a row of exceeding our commitments, awesome. Which to me just feels like that's our job and that's what we should do. But it's something without a doubt that I'm happy about. I think the other thing, Matt, my big thing this year was, hey, we've done a good job in North America. I talked about some of the tough decisions we've made to get us to this point. But I think the thing I'm most proud of this year with the team is that we're going to grow all 4 regions of the world. And so now it's been a story of rebuild credibility, and now it's balance. And Matt, as I look at the future, what we've been on an acquisition. We've been on an acquisition spree really in the last couple years. And so I look at it now, and I think the next step we need to take is, it's one thing to take something, to take this, the sum of the parts and bolt it on, but it's to truly get better as a selling organization. I need my team across the world to understand the full price book. They need to internalize and personalize the acquisitions we've made and how they actually weave it into an account plan.
Yeah.
That's best practice. I mean, I've told the guys, I'm not asking you to do anything that I didn't do when I was knocking on doors. Sure. And I've got the luxury of having probably done every job in the sales in our company. But it's really that, Matt. We've made all these things because the piper comes due, and when I have to sit in front of the board, or we talk to investors, one of the things they're looking at is, you buy these companies, but you need to really move them forward. You guys have this big global brand. Yep. How do you help scale those things? And when I look in the mirror, Matt, I think it's something that we have to, we fundamentally can and will do a better job of. So never the easiest things, but it's always the hardest things I think that we have to look at and assess. Yep. And I have full faith in the team that we'll ultimately take these assets and make, kind of the traditional 1 + 1 = 3, because we're in an enviable position, I think, to do that.
Jack, do you, with inorganic synergies that can be captured, but the integration of 2 sales forces, or a sales force into the big Motorola entity, can be overwhelming as an individual contributor. So I've got that piece, and then there's sort of like the core organic Motorola performance conditions things that you're always tinkering with. When you look at the growth number for 18 and 19, and you're thinking about the strategy going forward, you mentioned recurring revenue, right? And that's top of mind for you and many of your peers, because that drives enterprise value. Like, how do you prioritize recurring revenue, inorganic synergy, core revenue growth, operating leverage?
And as I think you just pointed out, it's all of those things. Yeah. So number one, and this is the fundamental first question that I'll get from any investor, and that we get, and if you listen to an earnings call, organic growth, organic growth, organic growth. So number one, when I look at our team, we have to figure out a way to grow organically. In Q3, we grew 5% organically. I mean, really a good news story that was very well received by the market. When you do those things first, so start with the very basic fundamentals, the blocking and tackling, the ball handling, the shooting, those kind of things. We do that really well. We're going to continue to do that really well. The second thing, Matt, and this is one that I'm really excited about. I think middle of the year, Greg announced that Kelly Mark, who runs our worldwide service business, was going to join my team. Yep. And so, in just 4 short years, we've moved our recurring revenue, and a lot of people don't know this about Motorola Solutions, from 12 to 27%. So that's great. I mean, just when I ran North America, it was you're eating what you kill every quarter. And now we're moving out of that. That alleviates some pressure. And the third piece is really that inorganic piece. It's how do you build the inorganic synergy? So there's two things. My colleague Bruce Berta looks at this thing and says, how do I platform the software companies we've acquired? We've got this, we kind of call it this orphanage of point solutions, and we need to move from solutions to bundles, and we're doing that. I talk to the sales teams. You got to actively bundle those things. It's a product execution, and it's a sales execution, and how we have to work very tightly on both messaging and how we price and all those kind of things.
Yeah. What I take from listening to you talk about bundling and I didn't know the recurring revenue lift was.
A lot of people don't realize
that. I mean, I knew it, but I didn't know it was that significant. So that does wonders, which I'm sure is helping to drive the stock price. But I think what you talked about in terms of the platform, right? That's another one of these overused terms that we all hear, right? Transformation, platform, et cetera. But what's interesting in how the way you articulate it is the ability for me to walk in and have a suite of services bundled, capture some cost synergies in terms of how I'm pricing that for the customer to bring a more integrated solution. That obviously goes into your inorganic strategy with who you guys are picking up. But your awareness of that, once again, speaks to the fact that if you and I sit down a year from now at Christmas of 18, you probably will talk about the fact of how much synergy you capture, what the bundle strategy has been, the 3 metrics that you're using. So you guys get the point with Jack. What he puts out, he's going to get done. So, hey man, on behalf of the SBI community, our audience and listeners, great to see you. Couldn't be happier for the success you're having. Yeah. So you deserve it, and truly one of the good guys.
Thanks, man. Thanks to your team as well for all the help over the years.
Yeah, our pleasure. Audience, if you want to get a peek into what Jack is doing, or if you are sitting there as a sales leader saying, why am I working where I'm working when I could be hanging out with that guy? Fairly easy to locate him. I don't know if you can get on his calendar, but there's lots of people that can help you do that on his army. But we do want to thank Jack for stopping by. Melissa, I think you've got one final thing to share with the team.
Yes, especially with that flexible cocktail schedule we've got going on.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? That's all about the employee experience.
You guys sound surprisingly coherent.
He's a golfer too.
There you go, the best of both worlds. For those of you out there, we feature about 50 guests per year on our SBI podcast, and we know a lot of fantastic people with wonderful stories, but we don't know everybody. So if you have a compelling story to share with the world of B2B sales and marketing, I'd love to hear from you. Just look me up on LinkedIn. My name is Melissa Valdez, and I look forward to hearing from you. And that's all I got today.
Thanks, Melissa. All right, everybody, that's it for today. As always, until next time, I wish you good luck as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on the studio, SBI's Executive Briefing Center, our team, or to schedule a workshop, please visit salesbenchmarkindex.com.